Hands on the hood, Grandma. Got a report about a suspicious character casing this street. The officer's voice was pure venom. She had no idea the woman she was about to assault trained generals and dismantled careers for a living. The Colorado sun, sharp and brilliant even in the late afternoon, filtered through the rustling leaves of the aspen trees lining the immaculate street. Inside her dark grey Volvo XC90, Dr. Evelyn Reed allowed herself a rare, quiet moment. The air was crisp, scented with freshly cut grass and the distant promise of mountain rain. For a woman whose life had been a symphony of disciplined motion, these small pockets of stillness were a hard-won luxury. At 55, she had earned them. She was contemplating the simple, pleasant choice between salmon or chicken for dinner when a sudden, violent bloom of red and blue light filled her rearview mirror, shattering the peace. It was an aggressive, jarring intrusion into the serene world of Cherry Creek, a place where trouble was something that happened elsewhere. Evelyn's hands, steady and sure, remained on the steering wheel. She pulled the car perfectly parallel to the curb, powered down the engine, and waited. There was no confusion, no panic. Decades of training had calcified her response to sudden threats into a state of absolute, watchful calm. A police cruiser, a stark black and white Ford Explorer, had parked directly behind her, its angle unnecessarily acute, a clear statement of aggression. The driver's side door swung open and Officer Brenda Rourke emerged. She was tall, with a severe, bony face and thin lips pressed into a permanent sneer. She moved not with the easy confidence of a public servant, but with the predatory swagger of an occupying soldier. Her eyes, pale and cold, scanned the expensive homes, the manicured lawns, and finally, the woman in the driver's seat of the Volvo, and her expression curdled with contempt. Evelyn lowered her window. The crisp air was immediately polluted by the officer's hostile aura. "License and registration," Rourke barked, foregoing any pretense of a greeting. Her hand rested on the holstered firearm at her hip. Evelyn's movements were deliberate, economical. She retrieved the documents from her glove compartment. Not a single wasted motion. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked. Her voice was low and even, a calm counterpoint to Rourke's abrasive tone. Rourke snatched the documents. Her eyes flicked from the license to Evelyn's face, then to the car's luxurious interior. "We've had a report," she said, drawing the words out, "of a suspicious individual in a vehicle matching this description, casing the neighborhood. Peeking into driveways. That ring a bell." The accusation was absurd, a flimsy, transparent pretext. "I was parked, officer," Evelyn stated simply. "I was deciding on my dinner plans." "Dinner plans," Rourke repeated with a disbelieving smirk. She leaned closer, her presence filling the window frame. "People like you don't usually find yourselves in Cherry Creek by accident. So, why don't you tell me what you're really doing here? People like you." The phrase hung in the air, as ugly and obvious as a wound. Evelyn felt a familiar, cold weight settle in her gut. It was the old, tired poison of prejudice, as predictable as it was pathetic. She had faced down enemies with rifles and rocket launchers. This woman, armed with nothing but a badge and a shallow well of hatred, was just another adversary to be assessed and managed. "I am visiting a friend," Evelyn said, her voice betraying no emotion. "Her address is on my driver's license. I am, in fact, parked directly in front of her house." Rourke's eyes narrowed. The truth seemed to infuriate her more than a lie would have. The placid, unshakable demeanor of the woman before her was a direct challenge to her authority. She wanted fear, deference, maybe even tears. She was getting none of it. She tapped a gloved finger on the name on the license. "Dr. Evelyn Reed," she sneered, emphasizing the title with mocking reverence. "Doctor of what?" "Basket weaving." Evelyn simply stared back, her gaze level. It was a look she had perfected over 30 years in the United States Army. A look that had silenced cocky lieutenants and steadied terrified privates. It was a look that communicated absolute, unshakable self-possession. It communicated that she was not prey. For Rourke, it was like waving a red flag at a bull. Her authority was being questioned by this woman's silence. She needed to reassert control, to escalate until she got the reaction she craved. She thrust the license and registration back at Evelyn. "I'm not buying it," she declared, her voice rising. "Something's off here. I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle. Now." "On what grounds?" Evelyn asked, her tone still perfectly even. "On the grounds that I said so," Rourke snapped. "That's all the grounds you need. Now get out of the car, or I'll pull you out. I'm searching this vehicle." Evelyn held the officer's furious gaze for a long moment. She saw the rage, the insecurity, the desperate need to dominate. The trap, which Rourke had so obligingly laid for herself, was now ready to be sprung. With a slow, deliberate nod, Evelyn reached for the door handle. Evelyn Reed stepped out of the Volvo XC90 with the kind of fluid, balanced grace that spoke of a lifetime of physical discipline. Her feet planted firmly on the asphalt. Her back was ramrod straight, her shoulders squared. She stood a full head shorter than Officer Rourke, yet somehow, she did not seem the smaller of the two. Her posture was an act of defiance in itself, a silent refusal to cower, and it only fanned the flames of Rourke's irrational anger. "Hands on the hood where I can see them," Rourke ordered, gesturing with her chin. Evelyn complied, placing her palms flat on the warm, dark grey metal of her car. She watched Rourke's reflection in the polished paint as the officer began her search. It was not a search. It was a violation, a rummaging. Rourke tore through the glove compartment first, tossing papers and a spare pair of reading glasses onto the passenger seat with contemptuous disregard. She slammed it shut and moved to the center console, her movements jerky and aggressive. Then, she froze. Well, she said, her voice dripping with manufactured triumph. "What do we have here?" She pulled out a small, unlabeled prescription bottle, the kind dispensed directly from a pharmacy counter. It contained a few white pills. She held it up to the light, rattling it theatrically. A sharp, unexpected pang of grief shot through Evelyn. That bottle. It had been her husband's. David's. The last prescription he'd received before the cancer finally won. She'd found the bottle in his coat pocket after he was gone and had never been able to bring herself to throw it away. It was a stupid, sentimental thing to keep, a tiny, tangible link to a world of pain and love. She watched as Rourke held up the bottle, a victorious smirk spreading across her face. "Looks like oxycodone," the officer declared loudly, as if playing to an unseen audience. "We see this all the time. People selling their pills on the side. A nice little hustle." Evelyn's grief was instantly replaced by an ice-cold clarity. She registered the act. The planting of evidence, or rather, the malicious misinterpretation of a personal keepsake, was a classic, desperate move. She logged it in her mind, another entry in the rapidly growing file against Officer Brenda Rourke. "That is not what you think it is," Evelyn said, her voice still impossibly steady. "Oh, I think it's exactly what I think it is," Rourke shot back. She pulled out her radio. Her voice changed, becoming laced with a synthetic, official-sounding urgency for the benefit of the dispatcher on the other end. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7432. The traffic stop on Aspen Lane has turned into a possible 11 to 351, narcotics distribution. I have a suspect in custody. Requesting backup." The lie was bold and audacious. Evelyn hadn't even been formally detained, let alone taken into custody. It was pure theater, designed to escalate and intimidate. Within minutes, the wail of a second siren grew louder, culminating in another black and white Explorer pulling up behind the first. Two male officers got out. One was older, with a cynical, weary face and a notable paunch. He looked like he'd seen it all and approved of none of it. This was Officer Kent. The other, Officer Miller, was young, barely out of his 20s, with wide, uncertain eyes. He took in the scene, the expensive car, the well-dressed black woman pressed against it, and his senior officer's aggressive posture, and a flicker of unease crossed his face. Rourke's smirk widened. She now had an audience. She had backup. Her power felt absolute. She turned her full attention back to Evelyn, her eyes gleaming with malice. You're in a whole world of trouble now, Doctor, Rourke said, her voice low and menacing. Possession with intent to sell, in a high-class neighborhood like this? The judge is going to love you. We're going to have to do a full search of your person now. You might be hiding more of this stuff on you. Evelyn remained silent, her gaze fixed on Rourke's reflection. She saw Kent move to stand beside Rourke, a silent show of solidarity. She saw Miller hang back, his discomfort palpable. She catalogued their positions, their reactions. Every detail was a data point. The stage was set. All that was left was for the lead actress to complete her tragic, self-destructive performance. The air on Aspen Lane grew thick and heavy, charged with unspoken violence. The afternoon sun beat down, making the asphalt soft and the metal of the Volvo hot to the touch. Neighbors, drawn by the sirens, had become discreet silhouettes in their windows, their curiosity a silent, judgmental chorus. For Officer Rourke, this was her stage, and she was about to perform the climax. You know, I've been very patient with you, Rourke began, circling Evelyn slowly, like a predator inspecting its cornered prey. But your attitude stinks. You think because you're in a fancy car, in a fancy neighborhood, the rules don't apply to you. Is that it? Evelyn did not reply. She kept her eyes forward, her breathing even. This absolute refusal to engage, this display of unbreakable inner discipline, was the one thing Rourke could not tolerate. It was a rejection of her power, a mockery of her authority. She needed to break this woman, to shatter that infuriating composure and see the fear she felt was her due. Her control finally snapped. In a sudden, explosive movement, Rourke lunged forward. I'm talking to you, she screamed, and shoved Evelyn hard against the side of the Volvo. The impact was jarring. Evelyn's hip slammed into the hot metal, a jolt of pain radiating through her. The air was knocked from her lungs in a sharp gasp. Officer Miller flinched visibly. Officer Kent merely crossed his arms, a slight, approving smirk on his face. But Rourke wasn't finished. This was only the beginning. Fueled by a torrent of rage and racial animus, she grabbed the front of Evelyn's expensive Barber jacket. With a vicious, two-handed tug, she ripped it open. The sharp, tearing sound of a high-quality zipper breaking echoed in the tense silence. Let's see what you're hiding under here, she snarled, her face inches from Evelyn's. Her hands, rough and invasive, clawed at the collar of Evelyn's beige cashmere turtleneck. The soft, luxurious fabric was a stark contrast to the ugliness of the assault. Rourke's intent was clear and hideous. She was going to strip her, right here on the street, in front of 2 other officers and an audience of hidden neighbors. It was the ultimate act of degradation, a violent assertion of dominance designed to annihilate a person's dignity. She hooked her fingers into the high collar of the sweater and began to pull, her knuckles digging into Evelyn's skin. The fine knit fabric stretched, then began to tear with a sickening, muffled sound. Time seemed to warp. The chirping of a nearby bird sounded unnaturally loud. The distant hum of traffic faded to nothing. Evelyn could feel the strain on the fabric, the heat of Rourke's rage-filled breath on her cheek. She could see the reflection in the car's window, a tableau of sanctioned brutality. The sneering face of Officer Kent, the horrified, frozen expression of Officer Miller, and the contorted mask of hatred on Officer Rourke as she systematically destroyed her clothing, her hands just seconds away from exposing her to the world. This was it. The precipice. The point of no return. The final, unforgivable act that would seal a career or shatter a soul. The tearing sound continued, a ragged punctuation mark at the end of Officer Rourke's career. In the final, stretched out second before her clothes were torn completely away, before her dignity was irrevocably stripped under the Colorado sun, Evelyn Reed acted. She did not scream. She did not struggle. She spoke. Her voice, when it came, was not loud, but it cut through the air with the chilling precision of a surgeon's scalpel. It was a voice forged in the crucible of command, a voice that had delivered orders under fire and instilled discipline in thousands of soldiers. It was the voice of absolute authority. Officer Rourke, she said, her tone as cold and hard as granite. Badge number 70 for 32. Brenda Rourke froze. Her hands, still tangled in the torn cashmere of Evelyn's sweater, went slack. The sound, the name, the tone, it was so utterly unexpected that it short-circuited the rage in her brain. She looked at Evelyn's face, searching for the fear she expected, but found only a gaze as unyielding as a mountain wall. Evelyn continued, her voice level, each word a hammer blow. "You have committed assault and battery. You have fabricated evidence. And you are currently attempting to commit felony sexual assault. Every second has been recorded, not only by your own body camera, which I suggest you do not tamper with, but by 3 separate, high-resolution cameras inside this vehicle." Rourke stared, her mouth agape. The words weren't sinking in. She was still caught in the momentum of her own power trip. Seizing the half-second of stunned paralysis, Evelyn moved. It was a fluid, economical motion, a disarming technique she had taught to Special Forces operatives. With her free hand, she reached inside her now-ruined jacket, into the interior pocket that Rourke had failed to search. She retrieved a simple, dark leather wallet. She didn't flash it. She opened it with deliberate slowness. "You asked me what I was doing in this neighborhood, officer," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying more weight than all of Rourke's shouts. "I am conducting an audit." She held the wallet out. Inside, behind a clear plastic window, was not a driver's license. It was a minimalist, official-looking ID card. At the top, the Great Seal of the state of Colorado. Below it, the words that would end Brenda Rourke's world. Dr. Evelyn Reed. Chair, Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, Post. Rourke's eyes bugged out. The color drained from her face, leaving a pasty, sickly white. Post. The commission that certified every cop in the state. The commission that could, with a single vote, permanently decertify any officer, rendering them unemployable in law enforcement forever. As if that wasn't enough, Evelyn tilted the wallet slightly. Visible just beneath the post ID was another card, this one a retired military identification. The rank printed in bold black letters was unmistakable. Command Sergeant Major, Ret. Officer Kent's jaw dropped. His smug expression vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated terror. He took an involuntary step backward. Officer Miller, the young one, reacted differently. His training, his instincts, his very bearing snapped into alignment. His back went ramrod straight. His eyes, wide with a mixture of shock and dawning reverence, locked onto Evelyn. He breathed, the word a reflex of respect for a rank he knew was legendary. Rourke stumbled back as if she'd been physically struck, her hands falling away from Evelyn's torn clothes. She started to stammer, a pathetic string of I didn't. You're not. Evelyn calmly folded her wallet and slipped it back into her pocket. She looked at the ruined collar of her sweater, then fixed her gaze on Rourke. The look was not one of anger, but of profound, weary disappointment. "You are relieved of duty, Officer Rourke," she said, her voice final. She then shifted her gaze to the younger, trembling officer. "Officer Miller. Secure her firearm and her cuffs. Place her in the back of your vehicle. Await the arrival of your watch commander, whom I have already notified." As Officer Miller, with a mixture of dread and duty, began to disarm his now catatonic senior officer, Evelyn Reed's mind briefly left the manicured street in Cherry Creek. She looked down at the torn fabric of her jacket, a tangible symbol of the violation, but what she saw was a lifetime of uniforms, each with its own weight, its own code. The memory that surfaced was not of pain or humiliation, but of purpose. It was Fort Jackson, South Carolina, decades ago. A blistering summer day. She was Drill Sergeant Reed then, tasked with forging civilians into soldiers. A recruit, a cocky kid from a wealthy family, had refused an order, sneering that it was beneath him. The other drill sergeants wanted to break him with push-ups until he puked. Reed had taken a different approach. She had stood before him, not shouting, but speaking in a low, intense voice. She didn't talk about punishment. She talked about the soldier to his left, and the soldier to his right. She spoke of the implicit promise that the uniform represented, a promise that you would do your job, so the person next to you could do theirs, so that you might all go home. Disobeying an order, she explained, wasn't an act of rebellion against her, it was a betrayal of every other person wearing the same uniform. She wasn't breaking his body, she was recalibrating his soul. That recruit later became an exceptional officer, and in every letter he wrote her for the next 20 years, he credited her with teaching him the meaning of service. Another memory, sharper, from a dust-choked briefing room in Kandahar. She was Command Sergeant Major Reed now, the senior enlisted advisor to a battalion. A young, brilliant, but hot-headed lieutenant colonel was arguing for a high-risk operation, driven by ambition. The officers deferred to his rank. Evelyn, the only woman and the only enlisted soldier at the table, had stood her ground. She spoke of logistics, of troop morale, of the cost in blood for a gain in glory. She wasn't insubordinate, she was the conscience of the command, the keeper of the unwritten rules, the voice of the soldiers who would have to execute the plan. The colonel, to his credit, had listened. The mission was altered. Lives were saved. That was the meaning of the uniform. It wasn't a costume that granted power, it was a symbol of a covenant, of a standard to be upheld. Discipline. Integrity. Honor. When she retired, the quiet life had felt incomplete. The world was still full of disorder, of standards unmet. When the governor had asked her to chair the state's post commission, a notoriously difficult and thankless job, she had accepted without hesitation. She saw it as a continuation of the same mission. The police uniform was a different color, but the covenant was the same, a promise to protect and serve with honor. And in Officer Brenda Rourke, Evelyn saw the ultimate betrayal of that promise. She saw a person who wore the uniform as a license to bully, who wielded her authority not as a shield for the innocent, but as a club against those she deemed lesser. Rourke's actions weren't just an assault on Evelyn Reed, the person. They were an assault on the very idea of service, on the memory of every good soldier and every decent cop who had ever worn a uniform with pride. This wasn't about revenge for a personal slight. This was about defending the line. It was about rooting out a cancer before it could metastasize. This was her new battlefield, and Officer Rourke had just volunteered to be the first casualty. The arrival of the watch commander, a police captain with a perpetually worried expression, transformed the scene from a tense standoff into a frantic exercise in damage control. He saw the torn clothes on the distinguished woman, the utterly broken Officer Rourke being placed in the back of a cruiser, and the two stricken-looking junior officers, and his face went pale. He approached Evelyn with a level of deference bordering on terror. "Dr. Reed," he stammered, "I am so sorry. I came as soon as I got your text." There are no words." "There will be words, Captain," Evelyn replied, her voice leaving no room for argument. "There will be reports. There will be a full investigation. And there will be consequences. You can start by ensuring the body camera and dash camera footage from both vehicles are secured and delivered to my office by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Unedited." The captain nodded vigorously, sweat beading on his forehead. The message was clear. The old way of handling things, of burying a complaint in paperwork, of letting a problematic officer quietly transfer, was over. In the weeks that followed, the story of what happened on Aspen Lane rippled through the state's law enforcement community like a shockwave. The evidence was absolute and undeniable. The multiple camera angles captured every sneer, every lie, every moment of the physical assault. Officer Brenda Rourke was fired before her internal affairs hearing was even concluded. The Post Commission, led by its new chair, permanently revoked her certification, making it impossible for her to ever work as a police officer in Colorado, or any state with reciprocity, again. Criminal charges for assault, battery, and official misconduct were filed by the district attorney. Dr. Evelyn Reed's name became a legend. To some, she was a terror, the woman who could end a career with a single, cold stare. But to many, especially the younger officers like Miller who wanted to do the job right, she became a symbol of hope. A sign that the standards they were sworn to uphold actually mattered. Her office launched a statewide audit of de-escalation training and bias policing protocols, forcing departments to confront uncomfortable truths. Months later, Evelyn sat in her Volvo once again, parked on that same quiet street. She was wearing a new jacket. she looked at her own reflection in the rearview mirror, the face of a 55-year-old woman, a veteran, a widow, a warrior in a new kind of war. Her expression was not triumphant, but resolute. She started the engine, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. The battle against Brenda Rourke was won. The war for the soul of the uniform, however, was just beginning. Evelyn Reed's fight was far from over. It was a fight for accountability, a fight that happens in quiet suburbs and bustling cities every day. What are your thoughts on the standards we should hold law enforcement to? Share your stories and opinions in the comments below. Let's have a real, constructive conversation, but please, comment with respect for everyone's experiences. If this story moved you, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more real-life narratives that need to be heard.